Hey guys, it's Tim here. I decided I was going to put up some of my older videos and then redo some of the stuff and show you guys exactly how I do 400 transmissions. And I know I got the other video up here in my library about how to do it in 10 minutes. We're going to go through it a little bit slower. I'm going to apologize in advance because I just got a tripod here. We're just going to go through it here and I'll kind of show you how I do it. So this is how you can do it however the hell you want, but this is how I do it. So I got my homemade jig here that I've used for years. This one looks like it'd been sitting in a pasture for a while. I just drained about 2 quarts of water out of it, and ooh, she looks like she's got a wasp nest in the input shaft. So probably have to do a little extra cleaning on this one. First thing we're going to do is take out the 13 half-inch bolts. Half-inch headed, they're actually 5/16, but beautiful, isn't it? Waiting for the air compressor to pump up. Now we've got the filter off, we just discard that, we always do that. Now, first thing you're going to look for is crap in the pan. What do we have here? And we've got a piece of metal in the pan. We've got to figure out where the hell that came from. More than likely came from the tube, but it could have come from, that looks like plastic. That's probably melted plastic and some metal particulate. We gotta just, yeah. Here's part of a dipstick tube. It was underwater. We got a snail shell. Somebody must have had this laying in a creek or a river bottom. Must have flooded over it at one point. It actually looks pretty nice, considering where it probably was. Okay. We got 11 bolts holding the valve body on. 8 5/16 bolts and 3 1/4-inch bolts. We're going to take the quarters out first. Reason being, there's a spring-loaded servo in here that may or may not be broke. So if you've got a 1/4-inch bolt or somebody else has already built it, and it's already been over torqued and stripped, you pull out the 8 5/16 bolts, it'll rip the rest of the threads out, and then you got a tap. So always take your small bolts out first. You only pretty much got to worry about that on the valve body. The rest of them, there's no real particular order. And there you saw it pop up, I think. Maybe not. Let's see here. You kind of see here, You got your tubes coming to the back. We're going to make you dizzy. We'll just, well, pop up. And they pop up like so, and then you take it out as a unit. Right here is the servo I was talking about. There we go. This ain't working one-handed. And the whole unit comes off like that. Let's see here. Where are we at? Yeah. Here we can see we've had some water contamination. Yep. There's a little more that actually got sucked into the valve body. Right there. I may just have to toss the valve body. Now we've got our low 2-band servo that sits underneath that other servo. So that when it sits in the case, it looks like this. This is your 2-3 accumulator. This is your low 2-band. So this all works together. We'll get into how it particularly works. It's probably easier just to buy a book. I won't get into that too far. Now we're going to take off our detent. This is our electric detent in the corner of the 400. It's electric on these. Of course, your modern transmissions, everything's electric. And we're just going to go like that. Quite often you'll find that's going to snap, so you probably end up buying a new one usually. If you want to reserve that, you're a little more careful. We're not going to reuse that, so set them 2/4 inch bolts. Now we got the valve body here. Valve, or the, what's the word I want to spit out? Spacer plate. And we're going to be kind of ginger with this because I want to try and get as much of the gasket off the case when I pull this. Since this is, a lot of times these just peel off on a fresher transmission. Since this had a lot of water contamination and it was probably overheated and somebody threw it out in their pasture as a core for some poor guy like me to tear apart at some day. And we're going to try and get as much of the gasket as possible with the spacer plate so I don't have to scrape the case, because that is a pain. Now this I'm not real worried about. We can clean that off with a grinding wheel. Not a stone grinding wheel like a Rollick, or however you pronounce it. So we got most of this. Oh yeah, this isn't bad. Now we have our 6 to 7 check balls. This is an older case. Here, I'll show you. Right here. We have our check balls. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3. There should be one here, 4, 5, 6. This one was omitted at some point, so somebody had been in here. The only two that you really need are critical. There's this one right here. I call it the Modulator check ball. And then the one at the rear, if this one's omitted, it'll lock itself up in 2 gears at once when you go to low 1. Also, if you put the wrong spacer gasket in when you reassemble this, it will lock itself up in 2 gears at the same time. It's very easy because they give you 2 different gaskets in the kit. Because some of your 88 and newer 88 to 91 400s, they put a check ball right here. It was the 7th check ball. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you what it is. We have a bolt right here. It's a hollow bolt. This is going to be what feeds second gear. That's why it's hollow. So we're going to pull that out now before we forget. Otherwise you can't get the gear set out. Not right now. I'm going to take a small magnet and get the check balls out. pan. Now this servo right here, this is our rear servo. This is our 1-2 accumulator and low 1 servo then in reverse. You have a low 1 band back here that applies when you're in low 1 to give you extra holding power in your gear set and for engine braking. Also, when you want reverse, the sprag that they use in the gear set is not going to work, so this band is the only thing that holds reverse. In some of my derby builds, I actually lock that solid to give you a little extra holding power. Ooh, that was nice. So we're going to go ahead and pull these 6 bolts out, 5/16. Quite often you'll find that these are stripped out because somebody over torqued them as well. And this should pop right on out. If you can, like these bolts, separate them. And like I've done this so long, I just throw it all in one pan. Don't do that. Just keep them separate because it just helps. And right here you're going to see this is how your servo is going to come out looking just like that. This is your return spring. Here's your 1-2 accumulator. The accumulators are used to cushion shift. You don't really particularly need them in a performance application. Sometimes I omit them, other times I leave them in and put stiffer springs like in some of your shift kits because you want it to be firm but you don't want it to shift too hard and break parts. So there is, you know, obviously like, well, I want it to shift hard, I'll just bypass the accumulator. No, sometimes you need a little bit of cushion to keep it from breaking. Alright, basically we've got everything apart here as far as we're going to go. We're not going to take the parking out yet because I want that to hang in there until I get the planetary out. Otherwise the parking power is going to get tangled up in there and makes it a big pain in the ass. We can go ahead and pull out our speedometer, which sits on this side here. On this one it's held in by a 10mm, and it's just like an aluminum housing here. So where's my 10? Here it is. Well, like I said, if you run, you can do this in about 10 minutes, but this is kind of, I'm thinking this bolt's going to break off. And it is. I'm not real worried about it. I'm going to plug this off with a freeze plug later. Now, if you didn't want to, now I'd probably have to drill that out. There's really no way of heating that effectively to get it out of the aluminum. Most of the time when you see something, I'm just hoping that I don't have others break off in the case here while I'm doing this, because the rest of them are kind of important. Ooh. River mud. A lot of times too, like this is why I don't believe in mass producing these. I kind of treat these independently, and this is what your speedometer is going to come out looking like. Now, if you didn't want to run a speedometer, you can tap this with a 3/8 tap and put a set screw or a bolt in there with a bunch of silicone, seal that up, put it right back in. Or, I mean, that's an easy way of doing it if you're cheap. I use a freeze plug in here. It's 1 15/16. I think you can see it. Yeah, here now you can see it a little better back there. I'm going to chuck that. Now, I'll move the camera over here. Oh! Yep, you can see it now. Here we've got the governor housing here. 4 bolts. Can't say as I've ever found a snail inside an oil pan before. That's kind of a first. So let's out. Oh yeah. Set those aside. This is just going to pop off. You get, you know, just like so. There you go, like that. And basically, what this controls is your fluid going to your valve body. This basically it controls system pressure to your valving, so it determines shift points. You know, when the pressure hits a certain point, as this opens up, then your valving is going to be pushed. It's going to trigger against the spring tension in the valving and trigger shift, essentially. There's a plunger in here. You can kind of hear it go back and forth. You get pressure in. The pressure goes into the governor here and out through this groove and orifice here. So it goes in one tube and out the other tube. You know, so you got your supply line from the valve body to this part of the governor. As these weights move against the system pressure, it moves the valve and starts sending more and more oil to the shift valves through the other tube to trigger shift. And there's actually two sets of weights in there. You can see if I can get this here. There's your large outer ones, and then believe it or not, these small ones on the inside are also a weight. So like these would go out, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how they work. It's a two-stage weighting system. You can rip these springs out and shove a couple of nuts in there to wedge these in, and then it won't shift either unless you, well, and that'll keep it from wanting to shift with the governor, I'll put it that way. But it's still going to shift because there's a failsafe in the valve body. See, GM designed it to where when you're in low one, if you hit a certain amount of RPM, it's going to trigger shift anyway. So, what was it, system pressure? How did that work? Well, we'll go back over that. So if you buy, I don't know, I don't do it that way. So, somebody accused me of a long time ago of that. Hey, that's my design. Well, I don't even use the governor, asshole. So, I digress. Basically, here's your governor. Now, if you were going to get a shift kit, they're going to give you two governor springs. This is where you're going to put the governor springs in there. But we're not going to use a governor because this is going to go to a demo derby. We're going to end up just blocking off the oil flow up in the valve body and modifying the valve body and turn it into basically a manual shift. So we don't need a governor. This controls your high-speed, wide open throttle, low vacuum situation shifts, your governor. The other half of it runs off of engine load or drivability, which the best way of determining engine load back in the day was off a vacuum signal. So they used a modulator valve through a spool valve up in this part of the case. We'll take this out. This is pretty much a throwaway item. They're like 10, 15 bucks new. So whenever you do an overhaul, shit can it. And obviously, what we can do here is we can put an aluminum bung in here for turning it into manual shift. However, you got to watch it. If you do an aluminum bung, you've got to block off your reverse oil ports up in here, so it doesn't. What it'll do is it'll just get in a death loop and it'll keep spiking your oil pressure up 300-400 psi and blow everything all apart when you go into reverse. See, with this unhooked, this actually acts like a blow-off valve. If you put an aluminum plug in here, then it's going to, when you hit reverse, this isn't going to blow off and your pressure spikes. So we can omit this, but we're going to modify the pump so we can do that. So if you just buy the aluminum plug that you can get from Summit or Jegs, or Cohen Engineering is where I used to get them, you've got to do other modifications, otherwise you will blow it all to hell in reverse. I know I'm rambling. You lost yet? Alright. So anyway, let's go ahead and pull that spool valve out. Where's my needle nose? And there's the modulator valve itself.